So, welcome to May. We actually made it out of April, which is the longest 20 years I spent in 1 month. I want to welcome you to a whole new way of being in the world. And the month's theme is a great way to start that. This month, we're going to listen to our hearts. This month, we're going to remember that, the words of that song, which is that you are beautiful and you are letting your light shine. And that's exactly what the world needs from you. It's not all of the big paychecks. It's not the perfect makeup. It's not getting the light right. It's not even being able to do the candle lighting without the script that fell on the floor right in the middle of it, which is why I was giggling. It's the you that is needed right now. And today we're going to talk about the seat of the soul. The seat of the soul is your heart, but it's the capital H heart. It's the wisdom that's within you. It's head and heart that make up true wisdom, because you go with your intuition as well as your rational knowledge. Often when I am teaching the science of mind, and I'm sure some of you can, I think it's on that side, some of you can see the teaching symbol. It's that middle part of the symbol that messes everybody up, because that's the part that's the soul. So we have at the top of the symbol, we have the pure idea or ideal, the principle, the mind of God itself. And that, if you think about it as planting a seed, just like the Kimberleys are working on, except that their seed's already been planted and they're skipping a few steps ahead. They're planting seeds because it's after May Day. And so when we plant that idea seed, it goes into the soil that we call the soul, and it becomes a plant, which is what we call the level of effect or the physical world. But that soul, which is also called the law, it's dark, it's hard to see what's going on. And for some people, it's really hard to understand. So I have two metaphors for you. And one is from my childhood. We used to spend, the way I remember it is that we would spend summers on Cape Cod. And that, for those of you who don't know, that's a peninsula off the coast of Massachusetts. It's where the Pilgrims landed first, and then they looked around and went, and kept going. Cape Cod is known for its beautiful beaches, and it's known for what it's like in the summer. And so I grew up, well, we probably didn't go every single summer, and it probably wasn't the whole summer. But what I learned was that we were to be on West Dennis Beach by a certain time at a certain chair, and you had to get there by 9 a.m. or somebody would take our spot. Here's the thing. I don't like the beach. Or I should say, I don't love the beach, depending on who I'm with. I'm happy to go for a walk on it in the winter. I am happy to go look at pictures of it. But spending a full day on the beach, especially West Dennis Beach, was just not exciting to me. And we didn't spend the whole day because you can't, you'll get burned. What I know is that it would get hot, and I don't do hot. And so we would want to go in the water. But on West Dennis Beach, there's this little area that's just the top, just the little wavelets hitting the shore. And then there's a drop-off. Well, in that drop-off, there's a ton of seaweed, and it's... And then beyond that, you might get to the ocean with whatever's out there. Maybe a little more seaweed, maybe monsters, I don't know. But to me, when I am thinking about the soul as it's thought of by Ernest Holmes, I think, okay, there's the me that's standing on the shore that everyone can see. And then there's that stuff I kind of hide under the slightly deeper water. Maybe it's not all that well hidden. And then beyond that, there is something that is universal. If you're into Jungian psychology, then what you will know is that any large body of water represents the universal, represents the unconscious aspects of humanity itself that we all share. Some people call it the Akashic records. But we have to go through the seaweed in order to get to the deeper stuff. That seaweed to me is all of the stuff I don't want you guys to know about me, all of the side of me that I think is less than attractive. Another way that I have also taught this or thought about this is think of a cave. When you're standing at the mouth of a cave, you're standing in the light and everybody can see what's going on. If you go back a little further in the cave, you might find stuff from your grandparents. You might find stuff from your childhood. You might find stuff from your great-grandparents. All the pictures and symbolically all the beliefs and the experiences that they had. If you go further back, what you'll find is that it's actually a cave system, and it links to all the other caves around the world. What Ernest Holmes wrote in The Science of Mind is that the soul life of all people merges more or less, and this creates the soul life of the race, the collective subjectivity of all humanity, called by some the collective unconscious. It contains the record of all the human events that have ever transpired. So as we talk about the soul, what we know is that as we go further back and further back and further back in our mind, one of the things we know is that everybody's stuff is stored back there. Everything that has ever happened, every belief we've ever had. And as Holmes wrote, the sum total of all erroneous human belief, which is back there, binds until the individual mentality lifts him or herself above the law of averages into the higher law of spiritual individualism. So what the heck does that mean? What it means is that when somebody gets sick, gets cancer or some kind of a degenerate disease, it doesn't mean that they have a crappy consciousness. It doesn't mean that they did something wrong. What it means is that something way back in the back of that cave has come forward to influence that person. Now, maybe they have some thoughts that they could do without. Maybe they've had some life experiences that were painful and make it make sense that, you know, they've had a broken heart so many times that now they have some kind of a heart condition. That's a pretty simplistic way of thinking about it. And so what we know is that if we see someone who is sick, if we see someone who's having financial trouble or romantic trouble, we don't look at them and say, well, what's wrong with your consciousness? What's in the back of your cave that you screwed this up? I didn't mean to say that on tape. We don't go there because this is not a teaching that's about blame. This is a teaching about responsibility, which is very, very different. There are ways of using all of that stuff stored at the back of the cave. There's been an urge toward greater freedom and greater love within humanity since the beginning of recorded history, and I'm assuming beyond that. And so as we move forward in time and as we keep going in our human growth, what I'm seeing is that all of that prayer for love, all of what the ancestors wanted for us, what our grandparents wanted for us, what our parents wanted for us, and what we want for the next generation, all of that is now coming into form. As well as all the old beliefs about what does it mean to be in the middle of a pandemic or an epidemic. So race consciousness is what we call that collective unconsciousness, that container with all of the beliefs in it. And so I went back to look up pandemics and what might be in the race consciousness around that. So in 1918, there was a flu pandemic. And it was awful. A lot of people died. They certainly didn't have the ability to communicate the way we do now. They didn't have the ability to treat as quickly and as thoroughly as we do now. And part of what came out of the pandemic, as well as all of that fear and heartbreak, part of it was women's rights. Carrie Chapman Catt was the leader of the National American Women's Suffrage Association, and she had been working very, very hard to push forward the amendment, I believe it's number 28, that pushed us into having voting rights, we women. And she got the flu. She was this close. It was hanging by a thread. She just needed to get it over the finish line, and then she got the flu. So she was in bed and sick. It's not like she could Zoom the president or create an email that went out to all of her constituents. What happened was that her soul and the soul of women at the time was focused on getting the vote. And so in spite of what it looked like with the pandemic throwing everything out of whack, as it turned out, the pandemic and then World War II right in the same time, was what pushed us over the line. Now, you might think getting pushed over that particular line was a good thing or a bad thing. That's up to you. But what happened was that Carrie and all of her people started saying, well, we're just going to assume it's done. And we're going to behave like we're equal citizens. And so they went out and became nurses by the tens of thousands. They went out and took over the jobs the men who were now at war or who were sick had been doing. And they proved, by serving the greater good, they proved their worth. And then they backed up President Woodrow Wilson in some of his stuff. And that actually pushed them into the 28th Amendment being passed. Now, that wasn't the only way it got done. There's another group called the National Women's Party led by a woman named Alice Paul. And they actually went and were protesting on the steps and saying it's hypocritical to ask us to be part of the war effort or to be part of saving all these people's lives without giving us the right to vote. So who was right? Doesn't matter now, does it? Because the end was achieved, and each woman listened to her heart and came up and was present in the world to the best of their ability to create the world they wanted. You know, the same thing happened with the Black Plague. Yes, millions of people died. Yes, it was awful. And I'm sure there was a lot of heartbreak. And the other thing that we know came out of the Black Plague was a lot of upward mobility. It pretty much ended serfdom. It ended the idea that you're born onto a piece of property and you live and die by the owner of that property's desires and whether they're a good person or not and whether they're successful or not. Serfs couldn't leave where they were because the lords, the owners of the land, were not going to let them. And they lived a rough life. They worked very, very hard. But after the plague went through, and it took about 100 years. But what happened was that the artisans, there were fewer of them. And their stuff was still needed. So they were able to charge more and thus became the middle class. The serfs who had been stuck on their land were now able to travel. And because there were so few of them, they were able to negotiate a better life, a better deal. None of it happened overnight. None of it happened without any kind of pushback. Believe me, the lords and ladies pushed back, and there were a whole bunch of rules made about you can't get paid more than, and you still can't wear these kinds of clothes. Unfortunately, there was also a lot of pushback and reactionary stuff after the Black Plague that led to a lot of anti-Semitism. It got really bad then. But what's the point? Out of this entire cave system that's back in the human belief system, out of all of that, what we know is that this is a painful time. What we decided pandemic means is this is a painful time when we lose loved ones. This is a painful time, and it makes it very hard to work right now for many people, and many people are going to suffer through this in many different kinds of ways. And we don't pretend that that's not going on, but as religious scientists, what is ours to do is to look at the condition and then look beyond it. Look beyond it to the God. Look, as Mr. Rogers' mom used to say, look for the helpers. Members of our community are putting together parades to go say hi to people. Members of our community have been feeding people over at Stagger Strait, the now 24-hour shelter that has been taking care of our homeless brothers and sisters since this all began, keeping them safe. All of this, there's all sorts of good things happening. There's people making and giving away masks all over the neighborhoods. If you look at, I think it's called neighborhood.com, there are people saying, if you need a mask, this is my address. They're all out on the stoop. And who would have put their address on the internet before this? So what I'm going to ask you to do is go back to the seat of your soul. Go back into your own heart and listen to that about what is yours to do. There's going to be lots of right answers. They're all going to be very individual, because as we individualize our expression of the divine, it becomes our personal self. That great vast energy, that vast mind that we call the one mind, all individualizes into each of us. And what is ours to do today, what is ours to do during this whole situation, is to listen to ourselves and the best wisdom we have available to us, to listen to history and see what we don't have to mess up because somebody already made that mistake and we can go make new ones now. What is ours to do is to move forward, taking all of the power of the ancestors who have been praying for our good for centuries. All of that yummy grandma, grandpa energy, all of that yummy mommy, daddy energy that wants the best for theirs, for their kids, for their next generation. All of us who have wanted the best for the next generation now are creating right now the world that works for everyone in how we choose to handle this pandemic, how we choose to show up in the world. And as I said, there's so many great ways of doing it. There's so many powerful ways of doing it. Sometimes it's going to be hard. I know a lot of people are not happy about not being at the center right now. I think it's much easier to do a service from the center, frankly, because my cat doesn't crawl into my lap in the middle of everything. I think, Tom, if you're still listening to this, perhaps we could hire him as an assistant minister. And yeah, that makes sense to me. Not really. There's so many good things that are going to come out of this, and all we have to do is be patient. All we have to do is call on the best wisdom we have available to us. The board met last week. We talked about how do we wisely open the center back up, and when does that happen? And I will tell you that as far as human voices that we will listen to, first comes our medical professionals, because we're going to listen to the experts. After that, we'll be listening to the governor and what he's got to say. Now, granted, we're still in a close down, more or less, until the middle of this month. And then on the other side, of course, we take it back to prayer. We take this into our own collective wisdom. And between the two of those, what we've decided is that we don't believe it's wise to open up again this month. And so these types of services will be going on through the month of May. There's a lot of good to be said about that. There's a lot of good to experience right now. And yeah, it's different and maybe it's uncomfortable. But I am willing to believe, I am willing to know with John, who talked about this in his prayer, that we're going to discover wonderful things. We're already discovering wonderful things about how we do service, how we do life, and how we live in this world that works for everyone. And because I want to pull forth all of that positive aspect of it and just look through the negative and let it fall away, what we do is go to prayer. And so I'll ask you to join me in the one consciousness now. As we choose to know the good, as we choose to experience the good, we open up our minds and hearts to who we really are, that life that lives within us, that light that is within us, that is pulling forward all of the wisdom of our ancestors all of the wisdom and the intelligence and the love of the one mind exists right here and now, exists within each and every one of us, no matter where we are, no matter what we're doing. Whether you're listening to this live or recording in 2 years, in this moment, God is, and God is all there is. There is a single divine heart, a divine mind that is at work in the world as the world right now, and we are part of it. We are within it. It is within us. There is no separation. There is only this one. And within this one mind, there is a divine idea taking form, a divine idea about this world and how we live in it. And it is perfect and beautiful and good and free and abundant and filled with joy. It is peaceful. It is generous. It is so good. And it is the best of all that we are right now, choosing to come forth into form as this world. I know that that is the truth of us because it is the truth of God. And because we collectively stand witness to that truth here and now, it must, according to the law, according to the way it simply works, the law must say yes. And our voice, my word goes back into the law, and the law has to say yes. It cannot return to me empty-handed. There must be a demonstration. There must be an answer to this prayer, and the answer is yes. I celebrate that truth. I celebrate that that is simply how this universe works and how spirit itself is at work within this universe. I bless it all and call it good. And so it is.